Well, friends, welcome to today's session. And today we have Dr. Mahalakshmi. Uh, she is a professor in pediatric surgery and Dean Health Professional Education in AVMC and H Medical College, Pondicherry. A very active teacher. I have seen her in other institutions as well, and she has been uh, involved with Partners International. Which is a offshoot of Harvard Medical School in curriculum development. She'll be speaking on improving students' engagements in online learning environments. Over to you, Dr. Mahalakshmi.
Thank you, Dr. Bedi. Thank you for this opportunity to speak in MEO India platform. This is something which is extremely close to my heart, this subject on how to improve student engagement. And this is what I thought we should name it as Adrift in the Pandemic. Because as I was just discussing with Dr. Bedi, everybody has been affected in this pandemic. It is not one particular class or one particular group of people, but all of us have been affected in some way or other, whether professionally, personally, emotionally, and all that. But I think one of the biggest group of losers have been our students, right? As a mother, I see my child attending these online sessions day in and day out for the last 1 year, 3 months. And in the college, I see so many different groups of students undergoing these classes. And we all agree that something grossly is missing there. And that is what I thought I would share some of my thoughts on that particular subject with you all. And thanks for joining. Yeah. So this is going to be my session plan. So I'm going to talk initially about what's the difference between remote learning and versus an online instructions. And I'm going to move on to discussions about student engagement. What is student engagement? How do we measure it? What is the degree of student engagement? And what is the value of having student engagement? So having discussed that, we'll discuss some more about how to bring about engagement, what conditions we need to achieve, and what are the ways in which we can achieve student engagement. Then I'm going to talk about some strategies for active student engagement in our virtual classrooms. So this is going to be the session plan, what we'll do for the next 1 hour. Now I'd try and finish it in about 50 minutes so that we will have time for discussion. I'm sure that we can take questions at the end of the session, but however, if you have a very burning, urgent question, comment, feedback, you're always welcome to interrupt the talk and ask that. And I'm sure Dr. Bedi will let me know that if there are any questions in the midway like that. So why did I choose this particular topic? This is a very famous painting which is there in the Louvre Museum in France, Paris, right? This is called as the Raft of Medusa. So those of you who are familiar with mythology would be knowing about this. So they have a raft, which is not a very pakka raft. It is what they have made, a crude raft. And they are caught in the middle of the sea, trying to navigate this churning ocean and surrounded by natural calamity, the dark clouds. There is no sight of light or land in the horizon. And they are looking hopefully for some cure, something to deliver them from this turmoil, but they are also despairing at the same time and don't know what is in store for them. When I was thinking about our plight with this COVID pandemic, this is the thing which came to my mind. And this is what has happened, especially with the group of people, that is our students, which has happened. There is a huge natural calamity and they are stuck in the middle of it. They don't know where they are going and how they are going. And this is what it is. There is a lot of difference between what we are doing during this pandemic. There are exceptional institutions which may be doing things exceptionally well, but I'm talking about most of the routine run-of-the-mill institutions and as normal blokes, no ordinary quote unquote faculty. What do we do? So we are actually engaged in remote learning, teaching activities. So that is what and how it is different from online learning, right? Now, online learning is usually a term reserved for, it's actually a pot poach or a stir fry of many things. It includes e-learning strategies, some blended learning methods, distance learning, and also virtual learning using many of these platforms. So this is actually a very well established thing, and there are various strategies for online learning which are well proven, time tested, they work, things like that. And most of the times we end up, at least we keep calling what we are doing during this pandemic as online learning. In fact, what we are doing is remote access learning or synchronous remote access teaching learning activities. So that is what is going on currently. We try and replicate what our classroom was in the physical form into a virtual space using some platform. We go there, we get the students there, and then we talk. That is what is going on. So our intent was not very planned, right? We were actually thrown into this particular mode of teaching learning on an emergent basis as crisis management. This is what happened last year in the year March month. And we didn't have much time to think about and develop strategies for addressing these students and all that. We kind of did it on the go. We were building the plane as we were flying it. We learned about Zoom in one day, and then we learned how to engage, and then we started engaging them. That is how it was. So the instructional development which has happened is also pretty much haphazard, or it is still emerging. That is what I would say. And unlike online learning or the MOOC courses many of us take, the focus is not on the andragogy or adult learning. It is mainly academic attainment. When we talk to faculty, we want to complete portions. We want to finish. That is what is the thing they say. So the focus is mainly towards content delivery. That is what is happening. And a lot of thing which goes on is a theoretical basis. And this is actually the best we could do in crisis, but it is not the same as best practices or established best practices which are used for online education. And the learner focus is mainly on attainment of these academic goals. So that is what is the main difference between online learning versus the remote access learning, what we are doing. So I would rather equate this to this, right? It is like trying to put in a square peg into a circular hole. If you use enough of pressure and enough of manipulation, this will still fit it into a circular hole, but not necessarily it will be a perfect fit. So that is what is currently, I think, which is happening with education in the country, especially medical education. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to ask you, what challenges do you face in virtual classrooms, in your virtual classrooms? So I would request you to go to this site, www.menti.com, and use this code. 1 second. Let me put it. Okay. I'm sure you will be able to see my thing. So this is www.menti.com, and your code, once you go to that, you need to, actually, if you're joined through mobile, you need to press the center button, open a window in your browser, and then put this www.menti.com. And those of you who are familiar with it, the next step is to put the code 58989073. I see nobody has joined the Mentimeter so far. Is my screen visible? Hello? Okay. Student engagement, online, eye-to-eye contact. I hope that eye-to-eye contact is lost. Faceless, fantastic. Technophobia, good one. Right, remote. Okay, the access is remote. So this is what 6 people have told. The size of the letters determines that how many times that particular thing has come in this word cloud. Network issues, teacher confidence. Okay, time, internet, student concentration, good one. How to keep them engaged, that's a very good one. Okay, inanimate, that's a good one. Technical difficulty, glitches, I'm seeing all this. Remote, not able to see students, good. Monotonous, loss of interaction or good interaction depending on who is the teacher. Body language, internet speed, okay. Active participation of the students, good. Empathy, I saw something about empathy. Virtual, okay. I'm seeing quite a few of active participation, distractions, student interest, okay, good. And feels like, I'm not able to read that one. Okay, no control over the class, good. It's online. So majority of the issue seems to be in the form of student engagement. It is faceless, it is remote, loss of interaction and engagement, monotonous nature of using this, and also internet issues. Right? Thank you very much for your responses. Okay. Yeah. 1 second. Yeah. Thank you for those responses. Okay. Actually, the same thing was asked to a group of faculty members in Great Britain. So this was one of the first papers which came out from COVID pandemic and educational response in UK and Ireland. This came out last year. And the faculty did a SWOT analysis of what it was. And the teachers also said, like what you're trying to say, almost the same thing. Reduced student engagement and diminished student-teacher relationship seems to be the major issues other than the technical issues, right? So that is what was the predominant thing. Actually, did some session, like in the sense we did an online jam session. Jam is an acronym for just a minute. So what we do is we ask the students some open-ended questions and record their responses as you just did in the word cloud. So we asked them what is that they feel about the online classes to the students. So this is what they said: stressful, painful, demanding, useless, network issues, technical, tedious, okay, pointless, problematic, depressing. So these are some of the things which came out from students. And this seems to be the trend across the world. That is what it is. And some of the people told, no, faceless. And this is what I call as the great blank wall of Zoom. This is what has happened. Actually, when we started out last year, the students were quite enthusiastic and willing to move over to a new platform. But of late, I think this is what we are seeing, not only among students, but also among faculty. So this is what remote learning has resulted. And if you do a root cause analysis, I think that is what we find. We find that the students feel that they are isolated academically, and a lot of normal, subtle, hidden interactions which go on in a classroom, in a physical classroom, things which we take for granted, seems to be lost, and this is resulting in poor engagement of the students. So that's the saddest part of the story. And this engagement, if you look at it, it is not some kind of a fixed one point response, but it is like a spectrum. We usually try and measure our engagement of the students in our classes by means of 2 criteria. We are looking at how attentive they are to the classes and to the lessons, and how committed they are in completing their assignments, in completing their reading, in keeping up with the course load, etc., etc. So we would like to call them engaged if they are quite attentive and they are highly committed, right? That's the thing what we want. We have next level is the strategic compliance. The attention is very high, but the commitment to complete is low. Like I'm seeing quite a lot of this in the faculty development programs we do, because especially things which are mandated, everybody should get complete training on online teaching learning or research methodology. So there's quite a high degree of attention, but commitment and follow up towards achieving the objectives is quite less. Then this is what it is, what we see quite often among students, the ritualistic compliance. No, there's hardly any attention, low commitment. I have to log in for the class, I log in, I sit for the class and go kind of. There is very little except for a few. It's quite depressing to see that. And one more level down is retreatism, right? There's hardly any attention, hardly any commitment. There's this great blank wall of Zoom. You keep on asking, any of you have any doubts? You want to ask anything? Can you interact? Can you interact? Actually, I was quite touched when one of the faculty members said that we keep shouting in the class, we keep asking them, do they want to ask us anything? Please interact. And hardly any response we get from that. So that shows that students have descended into that kind of thing. And worst is the rebellion, no? People trying to annotate your slides or writing some nonsense in the slides or Zoom. So their attention is diverted. They are trying to actually play up, and there is hardly any commitment. So this is what is how bad they can descend if the student engagement is quite poor. I really like this infographic from TeachTech, which actually came. So then what exactly do we mean by this term student engagement? Initially, when we started talking about this, actually the medical teacher and AAME commissioned one study on trying to find out how to improve student engagement. And initial definitions looked at how well the students are represented in the curriculum governance, and also their voices are heard, and whether they are actually participating actively in teaching learning activities. So that is what was the definition we started with in 2001. However, in this nice article in Medical Teacher, which appeared in 2018, that definition has undergone much more wider perspectives. Now we actually talk about the interaction between the time, effort, and the resources put in for learning by the students as well as by the teachers and the institutes. And with the aim that we want to optimize the student experience. We want them actually to enjoy what they are learning, to get the necessary help when they are learning, to know what is acceptable and not is acceptable. At the end of it, achieve their learning outcomes or enhance the achievement of learning outcomes. So this is where it is. So it has become much more complex in this way. So what happens when your student is engaged? I don't have to tell you, their motivation levels are good. They take ownership of their own learning. They're committed towards the course and towards achieving those learner outcomes. They feel a better sense of achievement and self-esteem. That is what happens when your attention is better and they kind of connect better with this thing. And this achievement of the student engagement can occur in three phases. One is when we talk or when we teach the students, there's going to be this academic engagement or the cognitive or intellectual engagement. That is between the content and the student, like how he interacts. Oh, I really like kidney, so I'm going to concentrate very much on that. So that's the academic enhancement. Then we have this emotional thing, what we could call as the head, heart, and minds. Know that in medical education we keep talking about these three dimensions or domains. So this is the domain of the mind. It is mainly related to how I'm going to learn, whether I'm going to learn deeply, what are the strategies I'm going to use, and how I'm going to self-regulate. So that is the academic engagement. We also have this emotional engagement. No, I really love KRS sir class. I want to be attend this. The way he explains, he's the best teacher role model in the world. So that is emotional. No, that is social, psychological, affective, right? It usually is associated with emotions. It creates a sense of belonging, social support, and also you would get aims for personal growth. That is emotional. How you interact with people whom you are learning with, either your teachers or your peers or both. Then you have what is called as the behavioral, how you behave yourself in the classes, right? The procedural, how much you participate, do you disrupt, what efforts you put, what is your attention, what is your conduct, etc., etc. So we actually engage the students academically, we engage them emotionally, and we also engage them in procedural or institutional formalities. So there are certain conditions for achievement of the student engagement. For academic engagement to occur, we need to actually show that students actually what you learned about history taking in year 2 is really different from, or it is enhanced in when you go to year 3. So that development needs to show that it has to be progressive in nature. The students need to be challenged, and when they are not challenged, when they think it is too easy, or if they are challenged too much when it is too difficult, this is not going to happen. The behavioral or institutional responses is mainly because of how well our content or course is organized and what sort of responses we have. If I fail when I'm in second year, will I still be able to write third year? So that's the kind of question student has, and what kind of responses we will be able to do. And what is the emotional component is mainly because of how inclusive we are in our policies, in our management of the classroom, and what sort of support we can provide to our students. So these conditions need to be met for satisfactory student engagement. And how do we meet these conditions? Okay, for if you actually your curriculum is good, that means your organization is much better. And because curriculum is not only going to be because of it is not only going to tell you what you're going to teach, but it is also going to tell you how you're going to teach, what is going to be your group size, and what is the assessment. A lot of things are there involved in that. So the interface between the academic and behavioral is the curriculum. The interface between academic engagement and emotional engagement is teaching, how you go and perform on a given particular day. Anatomy classes are always excellent, our teachers are wonderful. That's how the emotional thing occurs. So that actually translates into love for the subject. And the interface between emotional bonding or being connected, feeling connected to the institution, and the behavioral responses occurs because of the learning environment we create, right? So we're going to look at it a little bit more in detail as we go along. So these are the things. So we can actually improve the student engagement by ensuring that our curriculum addresses it, our teaching learning methods are in line with that, and by creating satisfactory learning engagement. So that is the reference. It's a very nice article which actually deals with the conditions as well as the framework. This is from Applied Academic Practice. Good article. Okay, now I'm going to stop this for a minute, and I'm going to ask you to go back to your Mentimeter and tell us, okay, we have seen all these problems. Can you tell us from your personal experience any solutions which work? We know that our students are having problems. We know that this is an issue. So the same code, right? 58989073. So having, okay, assignments, technological command, that's a good one. Asking questions, use of LMS, good. Providing authentic tasks, coordination, short quiz, question, assignments, interactive teaching, offline interaction with students, short question tasks, LMS, small group discussions, online engagement, polls. Only way is to interact more. Okay. New technological methods, good. Use of polls and questions. Calling students by name, that's a very good one. Actually, I had the pleasure of working with one of the faculty We had 250 students and he knew all 250 students by name for many batches to come. Dr. Praveen Charles. Okay. Ongoing assessment, student presentations, feedback. That's a good one. Out of box questions, more pictures, quiz, motivating the students, tutorials asking questions, MCQs, small groups. Okay. PBL. Okay. Rewarding the students, good organization, execution, and planning. Whoever has thought of it that's a very good response. Quiz on Google Forms after lectures, it works. Think, share, pair. Okay. Flipping between the slide and students' camera, good. Promoting students' seminars. Small groups and group leader, that's a good one. Assigning some responsibilities to the students. Asking questions randomly. Kahoot. Okay. Breakout room. Teachers don't work hard on making materials. Accepted. Happens. You make one PowerPoint on CVS pharmacology and you are set for another 5 years if you can request your HOD to assign the same system to you for next 5 years. I'm just giving an example as pharmacology. It might be any other system or any other subject. So that's it. Emotional attachment, debate, Viva OC, innovations, personal attentions, peer-to-peer learning, new technology, only way is to interact more, online engagement, alternate day interaction with online teaching or later assignments, probing questions, brainstorming, good student presentations, spotlights, asking their experience, asking their feedback, assignments, Google Classroom, be a role model. Okay. Asking questions with calling names, I don't know, it really is a two-edged sword currently, I think. Interacting with the students are present physically. Annotation, okay. Repeat a small area just taught, okay, maybe summarizing. Giving a break between long class, assignments. Flipping between the slide, I think we have seen that. Okay, so I think we have got quite a few responses. I'm seeing polls, feedback, question. It's coming again and again. So let's stop it here and I'll go back to my presentation. Thank you for sharing that very nice thing, strategies which work. Most of these strategies which work, right? It is just that putting them into one package. So if you really see what are the strategies that work, right? This again a very nice article, how to engage students in virtual classrooms. It came recently only in the Medical Science Educator. This Abhi Sriharan is somebody who's working in McMaster's University in Canada, and he has been involved in online teaching learning for quite some time. That's a good commentary which he has written. So basically, if you think about strategies, we are going to put them in that broad baskets. So we are going to put them into three different baskets. We are going to focus on instructional strategies, how we can do, right? If you remember that 3-point Venn diagram we had. So what is going to be my instructional strategy or lesson planning? How am I going to manage my classroom effectively? And what is the sort of learning environment we are going to create? So whatever responses you had given, if you think about it, I think this will fit into any of these three things, right? Most of them. So the first and foremost is what are we going to teach, right? Our lesson planning or curriculum planning. So how are we going to translate what we have been doing for 20 years, 30 years in a physical environment into a class which is suitable more for this? No, we know that we cannot do a lot of things which we can do, especially the psychomotor skills and all that. We can't do a 100% authentic way when we are trying to do many of these things in online platform. But still there are some ways in which we can actually engage the students much more effectively. So from what I had already made, this is the curriculum which I have made for first year, second year, third year, which I have been teaching for so many years. But in this particular things, what are the competencies I want them to focus on? I want them to learn about how the disease spreads. I want them to learn about how to prevent strategies. I want them to learn about the applied immunology in how the vaccines work. So we need to identify and see what competencies we want to focus on. And most important is in any kind of curriculum planning, it's not that where you start which counts, it is the end which counts, right? We need to design the curriculum, we need to design the teaching learning strategies with the end in mind. So what is that the learners have to demonstrate that they have really understood this kind of course material? So how am I going to assess? That's the first question we need to ask. Let us teach now and then assess later usually will not result in us achieving the desired learning outcome. So what is that I want to achieve at the end of this course? So these are sound pedagogic practices. They remain the same in online learning environment also. Then what assignments or learning activities will support learning? So that is the next question. Okay, so we want them to learn this particular piece of information or this particular piece of knowledge. So what should I do to ensure this done? Right? Sometime back, I had an interaction with the student group, and they actually said that last year also we missed out a lot of clinical postings. Now also we are missing out a lot of clinical postings. So somebody comes and talks to us about how you can get over the swelling in a hydrocele and it doesn't happen in a hernia and all that. And I have absolutely, you can't beat the daylights out of me, but I cannot really imagine what this is it. So that is the kind of thing. If you want to teach them how to do, get above the swelling, you need to at least show them a video, right? Than rather than just talk for 15 minutes about how to get above the swelling. So what activities will support this learning? And how many of them will require live activities? One of the effective strategies we can do is we can actually do all this history taking with the standardized patients, which can actually be recorded and shown also. So some of this can be used in a live way. And what activities can be provided as a self-directed learning activity? Okay, let's say that we are going to teach this particular organism or virus today. So we don't have to teach everything about that virus. Okay, we need to teach the core concepts, and the rest of it can be taught. Part of it can be taught in the way of self-directed learning. So some of these activities we need to involve the students and make sure that they take responsibility of this. And how are we going to organize? Having identified what learning activities is going to support this, how are we going to organize these learning activities and assignments? So that is what we need to actually think about lesson planning or blueprinting. And when you actually go for instruction, the plan has to be very agile. Agile is a very nice term which we have borrowed from the IT industry. They actually think on the go. Okay, that's what they do. So we need to set very clear expectations in the class. If you are unhappy if the students log into the class much later than that designated time, you need to make sure that it is told explicitly in the beginning of the class. What is that kind of behavior? What is the kind of expectations you have from the students? I think that needs to be, Dr. KRS used to actually, KR Sethuraman used to say something. When you sit in the flight, right, every time, even if you are traveling for thousandth time, they'll always tell you they won't ask you whether you have heard the pre-flight instructions before. Every time they say. So sometimes like that, we need to make sure that we set the expectations very clear at the beginning of the class. These are the rules in my class which needs to be followed. Instead of explaining the information or trying to tell them what it is, if we can tell them that why are we learning this, I think the relevance that makes much more sense to them. And in an online platform, there is not much place you can hide, right? Your use of multimedia needs to be quite effective. Then only actually you can retain the attention span of the students. And most important part is chunking the content. We all know that the 5 to 7 pieces of information needs to be given in 1 hour lecture, right? Maximum we can put 10 to 15 minutes. Beyond that, we need to actually, we can't keep on going. That is what is this. There's a very recent study by Google which tried to measure the attention span of people post COVID, and they have found that it has come down to horrible 8 seconds. That's all somebody wants to look at your content and see whether it is attractive or catchy enough. So if you want to get this Zenex students into our class, so we need to make sure that they are hooked on to our content. So that means we need to use our multimedia effectively, and we need to provide them in bite-sized pieces. That's what it is. And the most important thing is we are actually trying to focus on giving a lot of information, but we need to focus on impact rather than this, and include breaks and activities. So that is very vital, because the attention span cannot be continuously engaged for this. Many of these are nothing but good pedagogic practices which we need to use in this thing. It is in the online learning is similar in that it uses this pedagogic principles remain almost the same. The way in which we execute only is this. So this is what we need to avoid, no? The dump truck behavior, cognitive overload and information dumping in the class. So we need to actually, in an online learning environment, the teacher has two important roles, right? And most of the times, that's what attention is very less. So it just goes into short-term memory. So unless we can actually go in for reinforcement, that knowledge grab, there is going to be significant loss of memory at this point of time. So we need to ensure that we do something to ensure that this goes into long-term memory. So that is what we need to do. We need to develop some relatable activities to bridge this knowledge gap. Okay, give them a problem scenario for discussion. If you're going to talk about vaccine strategies, ask them to talk about what is going on with clinical trial of vaccines there. Give them some time to discuss with peers or in small groups. Use this breakout room platforms, which is available in most of these platforms quite effectively. Ask them open-ended questions and you'll be surprised with what they can come up with. If you are surprised about the word cloud, which you as esteemed faculty members gave, you should see some of the word clouds generated by students. Fantastic they are. You can ask them to make questions, right? If you were the teacher, what's the sort of questions you're going to ask from this? So that's a very effective strategy. You can run quiz, as you already said. You can sometimes ask them to write short essays, narratives, or online forums. But those are also very good for, these activities are quite good for bridging this knowledge gap. The teacher has two roles in an online learning environment. One is that the traditional role what we play, that is the subject matter expert. We are bound to share our disciplinary expertise and pass this content expertise to the students. But more importantly, in a normal classroom, right, there are subtle shifts, and there is an equilibrium which happens in the normal class. There is going to be a engagement between the students. They are going to collectively express, oh sir, or they are going to say very nice and they get impressed, or they will actually interact with each other and things like that, which does not happen in an online environment. So we have to actually go ahead and create all these things, even if it is like pushing something down somebody's throat. No, we need to actually engage. We need to keep on egging them. We need to ensure that they participate, and we have to ensure that the students take ownership for their learning. It is not just their job finishes when they log into the class and put attendance, and our job finishes when we actually go and read out our PowerPoint and come back. So if that is going to be our strategy, then there is going to be a lot of problem with student engagement. You can use a lot of facilitation technique. I think we saw many of these in this. You can summarize, you can ask probing questions. You can actually, some questions which come from students, you can ask them only to answer or to pass comments. You can play the devil's advocate, right? What if it is this way? So you can ask questions the other way around. You can ask them to bridge what they have already learned. You can refer back to what we discussed earlier in the class, in the previous semester, and previous courses, etc., etc. And what I found very interesting was do grades as incentives. Normally, what we do is that 100% is not maximum what you can achieve. So if you write an essay exceptionally well, or if you write 10 marks is the marks for essay, you write exceptionally well, I'll give you 9 marks. I'll cut only 1 out of it. Then you write average, you're going to get 5 to 6 marks. You write very poorly, you're going to get 2. So what we actually do is diminishing kind of valuation. What if you actually reverse this entire process and you start at 0? You have to show that you have learned this by proving, answering this question or writing this narrative or participating in that discussion. So if you actually have more focus on formative assessment and formative assessment on a continuous basis, and say that you have to earn every point of your internal assessment, every point of your grading as you go along. probably that might be a much better strategy to use than trying to use punitive strategies. And what we need to bring into the online class is our teaching presence, right? Most of us are into medicine, medical education, because of the passion we bring into our work, the passion we bring into our teaching, to see our students grow and all that. And it's also because it's intellectually very stimulating, right? You keep seeing it might be the same panya, but every time it's something new which you're going to learn. So this is what we bring into our classroom, and it is for us to create a positive learning environment, and most importantly, especially in an online class, to build in a structure, to put in best practices, right? This is what I expect students to do. I want them to do at this point of time. This is the kind of attention I want. This is the kind of involvement I need from students. So that kind of structure, if it is put in, that is what makes the teaching presence felt in online class. Otherwise, most of the times what I'm seeing in that great blank wall, the students' video camera is off, so is the teachers. So we are actually staring at only a PowerPoint at any given point of time. That's what happens. So in an online learning environment, we need to make sure that we deliberately foster collaborations. So even if it takes much longer to complete the portions, it's okay. You can give them some kind of a group activities, divide them into small groups, make sure that they use some problems, right? If you remember your Bloom's taxonomy, we always start with remembering, understanding, and application, and it keeps going, right? The topmost is there. So what we do is we try to address the lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy in our online class, in our physical classes or classes, and we leave the problem solving or how to apply this or how to synthesize to the student do it at their own time. So what if we invert the pyramid and we actually do this memorizing, understanding part of it beforehand, and then do this? Voiceover PPTs are a very good option. So you can ask students to watch the PPTs and come, or at least if you want to teach them about something, part of this can be given as a student for self-directed learning assignment, or it can be given as a small student micro seminar at the beginning of the class, or we can have more discussion times, breakout rooms, small group teachings. So we need to actually foster collaborations between students. Then only they will be able to overcome this behavioral as well as emotional isolation which is there. The involvement, uh, other than cognitive, it is the emotional or social involvement, and the behavioral involvement or engagement in class comes because of collaborations and learning from each other. That is what it is. Okay, this we have already told. And as teachers, we need to synthesize rather than just uh, beautifully replicate what is being given. We should have the ability to synthesize the core points in that particular chapter and tell them. So they should get something more out of reading textbooks. Their English is as good as our English. They'll be able to read textbooks, watch videos as much as we are able to do. So what they are not able to get is that application of that concept and synthesis of facts. So that is what we should be focusing on. And many of these functions, as you already put, right, this needs to be used effectively. So then comes the question of classroom management, right? What I find in a lot of interactions with students and faculty is we are losing a little bit of empathy to students. Everybody is affected, okay, but we are trying to put technology before people, right? How often we keep our webcams on, greet each other before the class starts, or ask students how they have been going on, things like that, right? So we need to think about empathy. I think I leave it to you with this thought, like how can we show empathy to students in this particular time? So that is what we need to think about. The most important thing is in a classroom, normal classroom, we have a lot of rituals. The teacher walks in, there's students wishing, there's going to be some kind of attendance, there's going to be some kind of summary of what has happened, and there is going to be some talking interactions, and there's going to be some presentations, and then there'll be stopping, some questions answer. So a lot of rituals which go on in that. So similarly, you need to have some kind of rituals or set behavioral patterns which needs to be put in your online class also. So if it is just like that, you keep your video off, keep your PowerPoint minimized as soon as the students join, and start projecting your PowerPoint and start talking about anti-arrhythmic drugs. It's not going to work. One of the things which works very effectively is assigning roles for students. You give the students some roles. Okay, you're going to be there. You be the co-host and monitor these meetings. You make sure that you let in people from waiting room. You need to make sure that you stop all people from speaking. So that kind of roles, or you are going to be the moderator for this particular breakout room. So if you assign roles for students, you can increase their engagement. You can practice active learning strategies which will involve them to put in effort to learn. That's what cognitive science tells us. If your learning comes very easily, no, you can forget it also as very easily. It has to be effortful. That's what make it stick. That wonderful book on cognitive psychology tells us, right? We need to provide what is called as a cognitive apprenticeship. Okay, assign students to in groups. There can be peer learning. There can be assessment of the materials written by the peers. So that helps the zone of proximal development. No, being near somebody who is able to explain to them in their own language, in their own context, works much better than other people. So that is what it is. It is for us to create this positive learning environment to prevent isolation, right? Most important is we need to find out what is the expectations of students before we go in. We need to promote responsibility taking. So what has happened is that we have things have fallen into some kind of an autopilot. No, things go on just with this. Normally, I've seen faculty or HODs becoming very concerned if 2 or 3 days student doesn't turn up for a class. They'll be asking what has happened to him, why he did not come for clinics, why he did not come for class. They'll try and contact him, call him up, and all that. In the online classes, how many of us look at the attendance and say why this fellow is missing classes for 6 days, 3 days? If you are doing it, and hats off to you, you are a wonderful teacher. But I think those touch points are lost. So we need to recreate that touch points. We need to communicate much more effectively with our students. And one of the things which will help is to hold office hours or your mentor-mentee meetings, so that the students will have some place and time other than official class hours to interact. When we ask students why they don't ask questions in online class, so many of them feel that they don't want to expose themselves in front of the students, so that there is no place for us to hide. That is what it is. So please make sure that you have some time available beyond office hours for your students to connect, right? More importantly, we need to build a sense of learning community, that we are all in this together and we need to go along together. So the most important aspect is to ensure that everybody is inclusive. It's not only the front benchers in online class, everybody is a front bencher. And we have multiple interfaces and interactions which are there with the students. It's not one way we need to communicate. Zoom is not the only platform, or chat is not the only option. There's so many other ways to go ahead and do it. So this is one quote which I like very much. So it shows where that you care. So when you care, it is much better. It grows much better. So before you go on to your next online lecture, there are certain things we need to get it right? Doing an online class is challenging for everybody. It is not whether I'm junior faculty, senior faculty, you are this, you're in this subject or that subject. Everybody has a challenge. So it is better to acknowledge. Sometimes we need to understand that technology is only the tool. It's the teachers in us who are there, the human connection behind the classrooms. So we need to learn how to use these tools in a much more effective fashion. So if there is a glitch, if you're not able to share some video or having some problem in getting the audio on or something, right? Make sure that you tell the students, you join few minutes before, make sure you do all your checks before the students come in, the class starts. And then if there is in midway any problem, you can always explain to students, this is what has happened, please bear with me for a few minutes, then put your audio video off, settle that problem, and then go back to classes. Everybody is quite understanding and nobody is tyrant to say that they don't know, because we all know that we are in this boat together, right? Useful, powerful pedagogic techniques. Just don't go on for dump truck mode, right? Or information overload mode. Use active learning strategies. Try and discuss. One common question which faculty tell me is, how will I finish portion if I'm going to ask them to do discussions? If I'm going to spend a lot of time in small group activities? It's not the output, okay? Throughput is how many classes I have created, how many meetings I attended and all that. The output is how many hours I taught. The outcome is what the student has learned out of it. So if there is not going to be much of an outcome, what's the point in having an output? You might have taught 100 hours of class, but if he has not understood much of it, then this whole thing comes to a naught. That is what. So use pedagogy which works. Try and spend some time. Try and get student engagement. The key to student engagement is in active lesson planning and appropriate delivery. Yeah, that is what it is. Seek feedback from students, many of you said, right? And ask them, what is that one takeaway you get from this class, which everybody can answer? One thing you liked about this particular classroom process. What one thing you want to change? You'll be surprised at what they can come up with, right? And most important, like practice-based learning and improvement is not a competency only for acquiring skills. For teachers also, it is very important. We need to reflect and think back like how we did this. So you can have probably a recording of your class. You can ask one of your peers to tell you how you did this particular session, and then see how you can go about it. So I'm sure that uh, with many things, no, the more we practice, the more comfortable we become in front of the camera, in front of the class. We have been doing this for so many years. All that we need to do is to translate into a new medium. It's not something new for us, right? We have learned a lot of new competencies as we came along. Uh, when we when the accreditation process started, so we learned a lot of new things. And the focus on research started. We learned how to do research, how to write systematic reviews and things like that. So this digital competence or acquiring teaching presence in the digital medium is not something very undoable for us as teachers, right? To do so, we need three things. We need to have content competence, that we are the subject experts. I am the best person to teach pediatric surgery, right, in our milieu. So that is the content competence. We need to have teaching competence. That's our expertise in teaching. That is the pedagogic competence, how to use different strategies for teaching. And we need to have the technical competence to navigate through this Zoom, right? So we need to have teaching content expertise. So if I were to teach anatomy, which is the best strategy to teach this particular piece of anatomy? If I were to teach it in online platform, the same thing. So what is my teaching technical expertise? What tools which are available in the online platform which I can use? And if I were to use this particular content, so what is this best suitable for this content? So that is the thing. So you need to have your content competence, technical competence, and also teaching competence. That is when we will be able to develop digital competence in education. I'm sure that with increasing practice, we'll reach that Zen zone. So if I were to take home messages from this particular talk, so I would say that as teachers, we need to move away from information-based teaching learning activities in online mode to more powerful pedagogy, which involves collaborations, which involves more active involvement of students in this. We need to learn to harness technology. We need to learn how to use the different features available in the medium for particular teaching a particular aspect. So that's something which we have to do. And most important, we need to humanize the classroom. So that is what the great blank wall of Zoom has to be broken. We need to ensure that we develop some good habits among ourselves as well as for our students. And sometimes it is not a bad idea because the students are with their parents. So we can involve them as an active stakeholder in the entire process. And we can think about grades as an incentive rather than as this. So this is what I think. We need to think about move away from transmitting knowledge. That's an essential part of it. But more importantly, about transforming our students. So that is what it is. And that is what having an engaged learner or improving student engagement in the face of this pandemic is all about. I'm sure like many of you might be thinking of this, right? You might say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one, and hope you will also join me in some other day. This is one of the best songs ever written by John Lennon, and I think that holds the torch for what we were about to discuss today, what we were discussing for the last 45 minutes or so. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your active listening. Now I'm open to take questions. Over to you, Dr. Bedi.
Any questions, anyone? You can raise your hands. There's a red button there, and you can also write in the chat box. Yes, a number of how to conduct clinical teaching effectively
In online platforms. Yeah, that's
Yes.
a tricky one to do because it is quite difficult to actually, students will not have the physical thing. But if you are like thinking about clinical skills, okay, as a broad category. So when we say clinical skills, there are 3 or 4 things. One is the cognitive skills or higher intellectual skills, analysis of data, arriving at a differential diagnosis, and suggesting the appropriate line of management, developing a management plan. So these are higher order cognitive skills, which are part of clinical decision making skills. We also have what is called as the sensory perceptory skills. No, how does resonance sound like? How does the soft squealing feel like? So that is perceptory skills. And we also have the communication skills which are built in into clinical skills, like how to elicit a history, how to explain to somebody, how to get an informed consent and things like that. So most of the times we are focusing only about the perceptory skills or the motor skills, right? Which are very difficult to teach. But the other part of it can much more be effectively taught. And also I have looked at certain platforms. There is Insimu Education, which is available as an online platform, which allows students to learn how to palpate, like for liver border, or how to do the percussion. It will help you where to place your hand for chest compression and whether this is moving into that. So, but it will not tell you actually the feel of it. The other parts of this communication skills and higher cognitive skills can still be taught, and we'll have to wait for some time for the students to come back so that we will teach them in the perceptory skills. So that is what we can do in the form of clinical teaching in online media.
Okay. Dr. Gauri Shankar Jha, please unmute yourself.
Since I am teaching both in the government medical college and the private dental college, I see in the private dental college, the most of the students, they attend the classes. But in the government medical colleges, the students are getting, the attendance are getting gradually day by day decreasing. Why I don't know, because I am the only teacher in the Darbhanga Medical College who is teaching on the Zoom platform or the Google Meet platform. Other teachers are just taking the screenshot of the chapter, and they are posting on the online group, and they are just posting their voice messages. I am the lone teacher who is taking the Zoom class and the online classes on the Google Meet or the Zoom class. I try my level best from the different resources which you have told, just thought about, but why I don't know. But in the medical colleges, the students are gradually, day by day. Yes, there are students who ask me their questions on my personal WhatsApp number, but I don't know why. But the student, the day by day, I am seeing the attendance are getting decreased. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jha, for that nice question. We have noticed this phenomenon, the difference between student engagement in the phase 1 of the COVID pandemic and in the second wave of COVID pandemic. The second wave, I think we started teaching online from April this year or so. We find that the reluctance of students to open up, reluctance of students to talk, disengagement much higher this year. Possibly because I feel that the Zoom fatigue is a real phenomenon. Zoom fatigue is any kind of cognitive fatigue. It's the concerns, eye fatigue. It is the concerns about the COVID pandemic, which is causing emotional kind of fatigue among students. So this is actually a real phenomenon. And the only way to overcome this is by persistence, by ensuring that they learn how to use their appliances properly. We need to teach them how to join the meetings and which appliances, because I find that most of the times the students are using a small mobile phone and staring at it for so many hours per day and sitting in one place, not much of activity, no fixed kind of lifestyle, no very loose kind of unstructured day. So that is what is the major problem. There is no quick fix solution to this unless like we persist on and ensure that we address these issues one by one, and making sure that we tell the students that this is our intent, this is our purpose. Despite all these hardships, we are working with you to get this done. So I think that is what the good old fashioned academic trust and honesty is what is going to get us through in this particular difficult times. That's what I feel. That's my personal opinion anyway.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Deepti Shastri.
Hi, Deepti.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. Your content competence, teaching competence, and technological competence was impeccable today, as always. Thank you once again. Ma'am, I would just like to ask you about online assessment. I know probably it was not part of your presentation today, but are you facing malpractices by students? And how exactly can we prevent these malpractices? Because we see it rampant in our institution. All the internal assessment examinations have become a farce. Though the theory paper is conducted with the faculty monitoring through Zoom, in spite of that, the faculty feel that the students have a mobile phone or a textbook behind the mobile through which their webcam is on, and others through Google Forms and stuff, they are rampantly copying each other. So it is very unpleasant for the faculty who are actually put in. I'm sorry that Dr. Jha has had to face these kind of problems where the faculty are not putting in effort. Our faculty do put in a lot of effort, but unfortunately, they are discouraged by the malpractices of the students. So can you please explain a little bit about how we can contain this kind of malpractice?
Yeah, one is, as you said, Deepti, this is quite, if you have an option to cheat, if you have an option to take it in the easy way out, why struggle, right? There are two ways in which this can be addressed. That is, one is by going in the technological way. There are a lot of softwares which are platforms which are now available for conducting online exams. So they use a lot of artificial intelligence. Where is your eye movement occurring? Is one more window open at that particular point of time in your device? and things like that. So they try and see if cheating can occur. But that is beyond the scope of most of the normal institutions. And for the low grade assessments, what we try and conduct, it's not a very high stake assessments what we do. So my take on this entire thing would be to conduct assessments much more frequently, have smaller quizzes in a more periodic fashion, and use that as a cumulative assessment rather than to have a summative assessment, internal assessment, which goes on for about 3 hours once in 2 months or 3 months. You can have weekly tests. That's what many of the institutions do, right? IITs and BITS Pilani and all, they have actually 90% of their grading is based on continuous internal assessment, what they call as weekly tests, and only 10% is assigned to the final summative assessment. So this is the time actually we need to incorporate some of those changes in that thing. That is what I think we should be doing. If they are copying by opening the textbooks and do, why don't you give them an open book test only? So why don't we give them a problem-based question which they cannot find straight away an answer from the textbook, even if he has to do, because most law schools have open book tests only. So why don't we give them a question instead of just saying, give me the relationships of or the structure of the stomach and the relations of the stomach. Why don't we give them that this fellow comes with a bleeding posterior, bleeding duodenal ulcer? So where do you think the lesion is going to be and how it is going to? I think we need to come up and creatively come up with questions. So open book tests, multiple small quizzes, focus on continuous progressive assessment. I think this is the way to go for ensuring both this thing. So that is my answer to it. I hope I have answered what you had in mind.
Dr. Raj Lakshmi.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Deepti.
Dr. Raj Lakshmi Sarangi. Then Dr. Ganga Raju. Please unmute yourself. Dr. Kavita Singh.
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Madam, I'm Dr. Kavita Singh from Jabalpur. I'm just sharing my concern that we have to, groom them into IMG. Now, in absence of bedside teaching, how we can help them out as far as the online learning is concerned?
Thank you, madam. Thank you for that question. I think it's a very timely question which is there in the minds of people, especially the students have gone into second phase and where clinical posting occurs. So one thing we can make sure is, especially forums like this, is to ensure that the students get the, let us say, a reasonable amount of clinical exposure, which they are before they are promoted to the next level or allowed to take the exams for the next level. Here some teaching is going on, but clinical competence needs to develop, and we need to ensure that when they come back, they spend some sufficient time in the clinics before they go are allowed to go for exam. If it means that their course is going to be increased in time compared to what it was or what the revised schedule given by NMC, I think that is where we need to put our foot down as a group and tell them, no, this is what we are doing and this is what we need to ensure which is to be done. There is no shortcuts for it. Maybe when they come back, we need to spend a little bit more time on that, or more frequent smaller group classes to ensure that they have at least the bare minimum knowledge which is there before they can progress, bare minimum skills which are there which they can progress. And one of the ways, at least the clinical history taking and things like that can be taught. Our ENT department has come up with very nice teaching plan, right? They actually have a patient narrating, like one of them act as a simulated patient and they come up with some history and they record it, and these videos are posted for clinical discussions. So things like that, we need to think about innovative strategies on how to get the message across. But most important is we need to have some kind of our organizational planning. That is where we need to come in as a group and tell that at least sufficient, they need to spend at least 3 months in physical classrooms learning clinical skills, predominantly maybe 2 postings per day instead of 1 posting, so that at least they get the basic rotations in major departments. before they are allowed to take exams.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Dr. Suchitra Palve.
Hi, Suchitra.
Hi, ma'am. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Ma'am, I just wanted to ask, first of all, I would like to compliment you. It's real a pleasure to hear you after a long time. And it was a lovely talk, ma'am. Second thing, ma'am, I would like to ask you that how to engage students effectively for the AdCom sessions in this COVID
Okay.
pandemic.
Yeah. One of the things that which I see, thanks Suchitra for that nice question. This okay, it's online. No, let's finish the AdCom lectures at this point of time. That is what I think seems to be happening quite often. AdCom lends itself very wonderfully for discussions. So we can actually take these cases, the pre-reading, the movie clips, all this can be shared beforehand, either in your Google Classroom or through your LMS or at least in your WhatsApp groups. And the discussion part can happen. And as you said, that many of these breakout room features can be used. So you can have moderators for the breakout rooms, either with faculty, junior level, or you can have even the students. And then at the end of it, each group can synthesize and come and say what they thought about it. Those kind of things. Role plays can still be done, but in the absence, there is going to be a mild delay, which is going to be there between the question and the answer in an online platform. So if you take that into account, and if your people are now, I think everybody is used to Zoom platform, so that delay is not very obvious. So we can still teach communication skills, role plays, and all using these platforms effectively.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Sudha Rani.
Hello, good evening, madam. I'm Dr. Sudharani. I'm OBG professor. See, here in our college, for the students, they have put timetable as if when college is open, that is from 9 to 4 with 1 hour lecture, lunch break. Okay. In that 2 hours are for clinics, others are for theory classes. But our students, even though they are logging in, most of them, they are just leaving them and going. Because when I ask them questions, only few people are answering. And when I ask them to at least put their video and audio on, they are not listening also. How to create interest in them, man?
One is if, thanks for that question. As I said, the Zoom fatigue is a real phenomenon which is catching up with most of the students. And if you have back-to-back classes, if there is no what they call as burstiness, that's what is that the term they use in technical term. If there is going to be no gap between the sessions, and if your sessions are going to last for more than 40-45 minutes, then there is going to be a lot of tiredness by students creeping in. So the first you can think about having breaks between the classes. So instead of having 1 hour class and then again 1 hour class, again 1 hour class, you can think about having small breaks between the classes, 15 minutes or so for the students to log in. And your classes can also finish a little, like if it's a 1 hour class, we can think about, because the Zoom platform, there is not much of this, some audio disturbance.
मैं यहाँ मेरे को लगा खाली है.
Hello.
Mute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So there is, so there is going to be, we can put this break between classes. We can spend, there is no distractions per se when you are delivering an online lecture and all that. So we can tailor our classes for about 40 minutes or 45 minutes and spend the rest of the times in trying to interact with students. So that is one more strategy which we can use. We need to ensure that we do this consistently day in and day out with all the sessions we do. It cannot work like today I'm doing an interactive session and after that once in 1 month I will do an interactive session and and then rest of it goes on as its way. So if that is done, then the habits don't set in. It is for us to establish best practices and habits in our own online classroom. That is what I think is the most important reason for student disengagement in this pandemic, I think, because there are no set rules for them to follow. There is no time for them to log in, no time for them to go out. What is the expected behaviors for students? So those things need to be actually emphasized upon before we go ahead. That is the key to engagement, I feel.
So all the faculty must do the same thing, not only me, because only 40 or
No,
45
like
minutes class.
if you are the HOD of your department, you can insist that this is being done in your own department, madam. Otherwise, you can actually be the pro runner and you can say that this is what I do and this works for me. So why don't you try it? You can try and motivate this, because faculty per se, we can't ensure that they will be listening to whatever we have to say, right? So it takes long time to get faculty in line. It's easier to get students in line, what I feel.
That's what, from 1 to 2, if one class is there, from 2 to 3, another subject will be there. So the students will not be listening properly. For that only, I don't know.
Try and put a break between two classes, madam. Try and put a 15 minutes gap.
I attended one day workshop from somewhere in the West, and in between the two sessions, they had a dancing session. Music was there, and all the participants were all right on the screen. Everybody was dancing for about 5 minutes, and the teacher told us that it puts physical exercise, puts some energy into them, and this is what they are trying.
Yeah, one of the common causes for fatigue is just staring at a screen, sitting in front of it for 3 hours, 4 hours at a time. So, which is very taxing for students, both physically and mentally. Normally, at this age, they are used to running around, right? So, that is what is another important issue. I've actually come across some chair side yoga, which is being developed by the Center for Yoga Therapy in Mahatma Gandhi Medical College. Dr. Anand Balayogi has developed what is called as a chair side yoga sessions. So you can sit in your chair and still do the yoga practice. So that kind of certain things. Some faculty members, many of the sessions, when we have student interaction sessions, you can start with a peppy song kind of thing, right? And make them do. You can start with an emoji response. Tell us what you're feeling today. So you can use some kind of an icebreaker. So those are some of the strategies to help them to rope into them in your thing. So that is what we should be doing.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Dr. Rachna has asked, can teachers act as standardized patients during online posting?
Yeah, you can. Yes, madam, you can really do. You can have your postgraduate student and yourself joining the online session, and you can actually simulate a patient-doctor encounter. We can do that also. There is nothing, the only thing which is limiting our teaching, learning, or providing an appropriate teaching learning experience in this online platform is our imagination. That is the limit, or that is the key to making most of these sessions work.
Okay, then there's a Dr. Sumeru Samanta. Dr. Rashmi Jaiswal.
Good evening, ma'am. A very nice presentation. Ma'am, I am Dr. Rashmi Jaiswal, Associate Professor from the Department of Anatomy, Chirai Medical College, Bhopal. Ma'am, we are taking online classes via Zoom for the last 1 year. And we are taking classes for the 2020 batch also. Ma'am, I want to ask you, which is the best method for assessment? Whether to take the subjective paper or the objective paper. Many times, ma'am, students, when I am taking the subjective, when I'm giving the paper, question paper, and ask them to write and submit in the Google Classroom, what they did, they used to copy paste with their colleagues and change the name and submit them. Then in that manner, how we are going to assess to whom we are going to give the marks. Many times I used to ask them, oh, she is your best friend. You have given the copy. Ma'am, how can we give the marks and which is the best method to assess? And the students are going to give the exam in a written paper. Please guide, ma'am.
That's a very nice question. We can actually do a lot of things. If you are going to go in the subjective way, don't ask straight away questions like describe the anatomical relationships of the stomach. Okay, try and go for applied questions where they cannot copy. But we have found that the students, they evolve much faster than what we can think of them. So they have formed groups, right? And they are actually, what I have seen some of them do is one person will develop the answer, and it just gets transmitted in WhatsApp or other groups, and everybody puts that copy paste, or the only thing which is original in that is their handwriting. So sometimes we get that. But if you give them some kind of a problem oriented approach when you are asking them to write this, or write them to synthesize some facts and then put it into this. So if you were a surgeon, laparoscopic surgeon, and you want to operate on some ovarian lesion, so which is the best place where you can make your ports on, or you can ask the students like what structures you will encounter when you are trying to release the ovary from the uterus. Okay, I'm just giving some examples like that. So you can try and ask questions like that, which makes it a little bit more difficult for them to find straight away from the book. That is one. For objective questions will work very nicely in online assessments, provided you have to do one thing. One is that you need to jumble up the questions in whichever platforms. There are very nice platforms, Easy Test Maker and many other platforms, TestMass, so many things which are there. So they allow you to jumble up the questions. They allow you to jumble up the answers. So instead of going only for MCQ, you can go for true, false, or extended matching items, or very short objective type of questions. And one more thing which works in favor of objective type of questions is that if you fix the time allowed for the students to take the objective tests, you can also do one more very interesting trick, what is called as the pre and post test. Like you can tell them to do the test first and then give them some more few days, 1 or 2 days gap, and again do a test and see if the scores are matching. Okay, if they've really learned it, and the first and second test scores should match with each other. So these are some of the strategies we can employ for online assessment to prevent cheating.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Then there is Dr. Radhika Nandwani.
Evening, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah,
I'm
evening,
Dr. Radhika.
Good evening.
Ma'am, it was a very nice presentation. Ma'am, I just wanted to ask, last year also we were taking online classes. I'm a pathologist. I'm an associate professor in Jabalpur. So ma'am, we were showing them the slides on a PPT format. Then when they came back, we showed them on glass slides, but they were not able to match those slides with that. So what will be like this year? We have, from starting, we have to show them on the PPTs, the slides. So when we take the assessment, should it be on the PPT format or on the glass slides? Because the students are not able to say which is the specimen on the glass slide is very different from the slide photograph which we show them. So what will be a better assessment, ma'am?
Thanks, Dr. Radhika. The rule of the thumb is assess what you teach. So if you have taught them using pictures in the PPTs, you have taught them using big size or more magnified images, then I think that is what you should be assessing on. After all, your outcome is that he is able to identify which is an abnormal cell and which is a normal cell, right? It's not
Yes,
that we are trying to make him into a pathologist. So
yeah.
I think that's okay to go for PPT based or projection based assessment techniques in that case.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Dr. Shashidhar has asked, what are the strategies to make students take ownership of their own learning?
Thank you, Dr. Shashidhar. That's a very tricky question. See, that ownership of learning is not something which comes overnight. No, you just put a thing and within 1 minute like chutki par nahi aayega, no? It has to take a time to do. So that comes from starting from the beginning. The main problem is our school system does not promote taking ownership of learning. So if you are in school, mother wakes you up, father sits with you, tuition teacher helps you, teacher makes you to write 100 times. So there's some audio disturbance, sir.
Okay, Dr. Radhika. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So there's going to be a lot of people who are behind the students in trying to put that. So we don't cultivate that kind of taking responsibility. Only a few Swayam Jyotis are the ones who kind of get it. So we need to ensure that this is what needs to be emphasized from the time they come, no? That what is given as learning objective is what is going to be there. It's not that what was covered in the lecture is what is going to be assessed or what is that you need to learn. So that is what we need to do. And a lot of it has got to do with how we handle the students and also what are our academic policies, how transparent is the way in which we done the curriculum governance. So those are the things which are going to make up making students take responsibility for this. But the most important thing as teachers we can do is to involve them in active learning strategies. Once they realize that active learning is the way to go in this particular subject, in this particular department, with this particular faculty, then they automatically fall in line. Why they actually listen to quite a few faculty and not so with other faculty is mainly because of this boundaries we set in. So to make the students take responsibility for their own learning, we need to go more in form of active learning strategies. So that's that. It's a hard road to take, no easy solution, but I think that's the long lasting one. No, you have to make them work for their knowledge, make them work to learn something. So that is what is going to serve them well in the long run.
Okay, so it's almost 8:30, and Sunita has asked the similar question. So how to train Indian medical graduate in bedside teaching? I think this question was also answered.
Yeah.
Any ideal reference or web link to be shared with students to learn about how to take history and examine patients? I think these, just Google it and
Actually,
you will find them.
Yeah, you'll find, and there are a lot of references. I think AAMC, American Association of Medical Institutions, they have actually, AAMC has come up with a lot of interesting online resources for students, especially for learning things like anatomy, pathology, clinical history taking skills or decision making skills and all that. So there's a very nice library. I think many other institutions have also come up and put up a lot of things. So we can share this in the MEO India group. We have we have identified some useful resources. So I can share it with Dr. Bedi. Maybe he can share it with everyone.
Yes. The answer, Dr. Swapnil has written Stanford 25 for clinical skills.
Yeah, that's a wonderful program which is done by our Dr. Abraham Varghese. He used to belong to CMC Vellore. He's an alumnus. He's one of these infectious diseases physicians who initially was with John Hopkins and then later on moved to Stanford. So he has put on wonderful skill of clinical examination, so called as Stanford 25, how to do percussion, how to do chest examination, how to look for cardiac sounds and things like that. So that's a good resource to start with.
Dr. Satyanand, this is the last question. Dr. Kadlur Satyanand. You have to unmute yourself, sir. Okay. Dr. Swapnil Parilkar. Yes.
Madam,
Last year.
I'm Dr. Swapnil. I'm at Government Medical College, Bhavnagar, Associate Professor in Physiology. Creating a conducive atmosphere for student engagement, isn't it very vital so that students are eager to participate in the class and are not afraid of the teacher to give wrong answers also? So can you
Yeah.
shed some light on it?
Actually, creating positive, thank you for that question. That creating a positive learning environment where telling them that no answer is a wrong answer is the most important. See, when we actually talk about questions, most of the times we think in terms of a nominal question, no? Where there is only one answer, which is the bacteria which causes this disease. Or we think in terms of dichotomous. Do you really like doing this, or what is the most this thing? So the answers can be either yes or no kind of answers. So when we actually make the questions into exploratory questions, like more open-ended thing, what do you think about it? What can be done to improve this, or what works like this? So then we'll be able to encourage students to come up with diverse answers. And most important thing we should do in our classrooms is inclusivity. Make sure that everybody is treated equally, whether he is a front bencher or a thing, or whether he has a history of creating trouble in the class. So once we kind of bring equity into our classroom, the atmosphere automatically becomes much more positive. So when they know that they are not going to be critically evaluated based on what they are going to respond, then the chances of students to respond becomes much better. So in these three elements, you need to be pedagogically sound, you need to ensure that you have technical competence, but most important is you need to ensure that your learning environment you create in your classroom is conducive for doing the learning process to take place. So without that, it's very difficult to achieve whatever it is. They might be scared of you, they might come for your classes, but it's not that you're going to become the favorite teacher of the batch. So that is what it is.
Thank you,
Equity,
Madam.
inclusiveness, and creating a positive learning environment goes hand in hand for student engagement. Because as teachers, we keep thinking in terms of IQ, right? What information I can pass on to this. So information quotient is in the front of our mind. But as students, they always think in terms of EQ, emotional quotient. How much I like this person, how much I like this class, how much I like this subject, how much I like this topic. So that is going to motivate them and determine their learning. So remember this EQ, IQ, right? The knowledge is only 30% of what students take away from the class, right? Our communication skills, the rest of it is the ambience what we create. So that is going to make up 70% of what is going to be the takeaway from each class.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
So I think it's already 8:33 and it has been a very lucid, interactive session. And let me make an announcement that MU India will be organizing a 3 months class of interactive teaching, in which many of these interactive strategies will be discussed threadbare. There will be one session every week with some interactivity going on, assignment during the week. So I have shared a link on the chat. You can click on that and see the details. Those interested may join. Thank you, Dr. Mahalakshmi.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay, for a very interesting topic, no? Chance to discuss this. These are usually not things which are discussed in many of the platforms. Thank you for giving an opportunity to interact and being part of this wonderful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.